The grand assembly hall stretched so far that its ceiling disappeared into artificial clouds. 10,000 seats filled the curved rows, each one occupied by a representative from a different world. The air hummed with translation devices, turning countless alien languages into something everyone could understand. Ambassador Kelthara walked slowly through the upper galleries. Her scales caught the light from the chamber's false sun, creating patterns of green and gold. She had served the Galactic Concord for 40 years, but she still found new things in this ancient place. Today, she found something strange. In the oldest section of the hall, covered in dust and spider-like creatures that built webs between the armrests, sat a single empty chair. The metal looked different from the others, darker, harder. Strange symbols covered the backrest, symbols that her translation implant couldn't read. "You found it," a voice said behind her. Kelthara turned to see archivist Molteth, an elderly being whose species lived for 300 years. He looked tired, his 6 eyes dim with age. "Found what?" she asked. "The lost seat." Molteth moved closer, his walking staff clicking on the stone floor. "I wondered when someone would notice it again. Most people walk right past it." Kelthara touched the chair's armrest. The metal felt cold even through her gloves. "Why is it empty?" "Because the ones who sat here vanished 50,000 years ago." Molteth pulled out a data pad, its screen flickering with age. The species called themselves humanity. Their world was named Terra, or Earth, in their primary language. The star they orbited was called Sol. I've never heard of them, few have. The records were sealed, then forgotten, then sealed again when someone remembered to check them. Molteth scrolled through files that looked older than most civilizations. Humans were one of the founding members of the Concord. They helped write the first treaties. They fought in the Unity Wars that brought peace to this galaxy. Kelthara sat in the seat next to the empty one, staring at it. What happened to them? No one knows for certain. About 50,000 years ago, they sent a colony ship to explore beyond the galactic rim. The ship never reported back. Earth sent search parties. Those never returned either. Then Earth itself went silent. When the Concord sent investigators, they found the entire Sol system surrounded by some kind of energy barrier. Ships that tried to enter disappeared. Eventually, the Concord declared the system a dead zone and forbade anyone from approaching. 50,000 years is a long time. Long enough for everyone to forget. Molteth looked sad. The Concord kept their seat empty, at first as a memorial, then out of tradition, then finally because removing it felt wrong somehow. But the knowledge of why died with the archivists who came before me. Kelthara studied the symbols on the chair. "What do these mean?" "I don't know." The translation matrix was lost, but I found references in other documents. He showed her his pad. This symbol appears in military records from the Unity Wars. According to one report, it means freedom or liberty in one of humanity's languages. They had more than one language? They had thousands. The records describe a species of remarkable diversity, different colors of skin, different beliefs, different ways of life. Yet somehow they unified when they reached for the stars. A chime echoed through the hall, calling the council to session. Kelthara stood, but she couldn't stop looking at the empty seat. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked. Molteth's expression grew grave. "Because the Concord faces a threat we haven't seen in millennia. We need every advantage, every piece of knowledge from our past, and humanity's military records, the ones I've been able to translate, describe tactics and strategies that no modern species uses anymore." "What kind of tactics?" "Aggressive ones. Frightening ones." Molteth turned to leave, then paused. "There's a phrase that appears in many of the human documents. It took me years to translate it properly. It says, 'Peace through superior firepower.' I think humanity understood something about war that we've forgotten in our age of negotiations and treaties." Kelthara followed him to the main floor, where the council was gathering. The mood was tense. Everyone knew why they were here. The Supreme Chancellor, a being of pure energy contained in a crystalline suit, activated the central display. Images appeared in the air, showing star systems going dark, planets stripped of life, entire civilizations erased. "The Vexkarath Empire has taken 12 more systems in the past month," the Chancellor said. "Their machine fleets grow stronger with each conquest. They do not negotiate. They do not accept surrender. They simply take what they want and destroy everything else. A representative from the Pelion cluster stood. His species looked like walking plants with leaves for hair and bark-like skin. We must increase defensive fortifications. Pull our fleets back to protect core worlds. Another stood. This one resembling a floating jellyfish. We should send envoys. There must be something they want that we can trade. They want nothing but our annihilation, a third said, her voice bitter. I've seen the reports. They view organic life as inefficient and flawed. The debate went on for hours. Some wanted to fight. Others wanted to hide. Most wanted to talk and hope the problem solved itself. Kelthera found herself drifting away from the arguments, her eyes drawn back to the empty seat in the upper gallery. She thought about humanity. About a species that had been gone for 50,000 years but somehow still had a place in the most important room in the galaxy. That evening, she visited Molteth in the archives. The old archivist sat surrounded by data crystals and ancient scrolls, his eyes scanning through text only he could read. Tell me more about humanity, she said. Molteth looked up, surprised. Why? Because we're losing this war. Because the Council argues while systems burn. Because maybe, just maybe, the answers we need are buried in the past. The archivist smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. Pull up a chair. This will take time. He told her about humans and their history. They had come from a world of extremes, where the environment tried to kill them every day. Predators, diseases, natural disasters, they survived it all. Then they survived each other. Wars that killed millions. Weapons that could destroy their entire planet. Somehow they didn't use those weapons. Somehow they found peace. But they never forgot how to fight, Molteth said. Every human child learned their history. Every human knew what their species was capable of, both the beautiful and the terrible. He showed her military records from the Unity Wars. Humans had fought with a ferocity that shocked their allies and terrified their enemies. They used tactics called guerrilla warfare and strategic deception and scorched earth. They won battles they should have lost. They turned defeats into victories through sheer refusal to quit. This report is from a battle at Kepler Station, Molteth said, pulling up a file. 3 human ships faced a fleet of 40. The humans were supposed to retreat. Instead, they attacked. They flew their ships in patterns that made them unpredictable. They used their environment as a weapon, luring the enemy into a nebula where sensors didn't work. By the time the battle ended, the humans had destroyed or disabled 27 enemy ships. They lost 1 vessel and saved the station. How? The report says the human commander sent a message before the battle began. Just 2 words. Remember Thermopylae. I searched for years to understand what that meant. Thermopylae was a battle on ancient Earth, where 300 soldiers held off an army of thousands. They all died, but they bought time for their people to prepare. To humans, it meant that sometimes you stand and fight even when you can't win, because others are depending on you. Kelthera felt something cold in her chest. What kind of species thinks like that? One that survived when it shouldn't have. One that reached the stars not because they were stronger or smarter than everyone else, but because they refused to give up. For 3 days, Kelthera studied everything Molteth had on humanity. She read about their culture, their art, their philosophy. She learned about concepts like democracy and human rights, and the will of the people. She discovered that humans believed every individual had value, that authority came from the consent of the governed, that freedom was worth any price. On the 4th day, she received a message that changed everything. A probe had returned from the Sol system. For the first time in 50,000 years, a ship had survived approaching Earth's star. The message was brief but shocking. Multiple energy signatures detected. Advanced technology confirmed. Recommend immediate investigation. Kelthera brought the report to the Council. The Supreme Chancellor studied it with all the intensity his crystalline form could show. This is impossible, he said. The Sol system has been dead for 50 millennia. The probe's sensors don't lie, Kelthera said. Something is there. Something is active. Could it be the Vex Korath? No, the energy signatures don't match their technology. These readings are similar to designs from old Concord records. Very old records. The council chamber fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. You think humanity survived? The Supreme Chancellor asked. I think we need to find out. The debate lasted an hour. Some council members argued it was too dangerous. Others said they couldn't afford to investigate when the Vex Korath were attacking. But Kelthera made her case with passion and logic. If humanity is still there, they might have technology that could help us. They might have knowledge we've lost, and if they are the ones who founded this Concord, don't they deserve to know what's happened? The Chancellor finally nodded. Very well, Ambassador Kelthera, you will lead a delegation to the Sol system. You will make contact with whoever is there and determine if they pose a threat or offer hope. As Kelthera left the chamber, she looked one more time at the empty seat. The dust still covered it. The symbol still couldn't be read, but now it represented something new. Hope. The ship Unity's Promise was prepared for the journey. The crew consisted of diplomats, scientists, and military officers from a dozen species. They all knew they might be flying into danger. The Sol system had been forbidden for longer than most civilizations had existed. The night before departure, Molteth visited Kelthara in her quarters. "I brought you something," he said, handing her a data crystal. "It's everything I've translated about humanity. Their history, their culture, their way of thinking. If they're really there, you'll need to understand them." "Thank you, old friend. One more thing." Molteth's voice grew quiet. "In all my years studying them, I learned something about humans. They value honesty above politeness. They respect strength but hate bullies. They will help anyone who asks, but they despise being controlled. If you meet them, Ambassador, remember this. Humans don't bow. Not to kings, not to gods, not to empires. They broke every chain their own world put on them. They won't accept new ones from the stars." Kelthara took those words with her as Unity's Promise left Concord space and jumped into hyperspace. The journey would take 2 weeks. She spent that time reading everything Molteth had given her. She read about human wars and human peace. She read about their art and their science. She read their stories, tales of heroes who fought against impossible odds. She read their philosophies, ideas about right and wrong that seemed both simple and complex. The more she learned, the more she understood why the galaxy had forgotten humanity. They were uncomfortable to remember. They asked questions no one wanted to answer. They challenged authority. They demanded freedom not just for themselves, but for everyone. The Concord had become comfortable in its old age, stable, safe, predictable. Humanity had been none of those things. On the 14th day, the ship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. The sensors immediately started recording data that made no sense. "Ambassador," the science officer said, her voice shaking, "you need to see this." On the main screen appeared an image of Earth's star, and around it, like jewels on a string, orbited structures that could only be described as impossible. Space stations the size of moons, rings of habitats circling planets, ships moving between worlds with drives that left trails of light in the void. "Is that Earth?" Kelthara asked, pointing to a blue and green world third from the sun. "Yes. And Ambassador, we're detecting power readings from that planet that exceed anything in conquered space. There are cities on every continent, ships in orbit, and something else." "What?" The science officer's hands shook as she worked her console. "We're being scanned. They know we're here. And they're sending a message. Put it through," the speakers crackled. Then a voice spoke in perfect Concord standard, though the accent was strange. "Unknown vessel, this is Earth Defense Command. You are in restricted space. Identify yourself and state your purpose, or you will be escorted back to the boundary." Kelthara stood, straightening her diplomatic robes. Her hearts were beating fast. Humans, they were real. They were here. They had never left. She took a breath and opened a channel. "Earth Defense Command, this is Ambassador Kelthera of the Galactic Concord. We come in peace, seeking to re-establish contact with humanity. Your seat in the Council has been empty for 50,000 years. We would like to invite you to fill it once more." The silence that followed felt like an eternity. Then the human voice spoke again, and Kelthera heard something in it that all her years of diplomatic training couldn't identify. Something that might have been surprise or amusement or both. "Ambassador, please stand by. We need to wake up some people who are going to be very interested to meet you." The Unity's Promise sat in orbit above Earth for 3 days, while humanity decided what to do with their unexpected guests. Kelthera spent those days staring at the planet below, amazed by what she saw. Earth was beautiful. Blue oceans covered most of the surface, interrupted by green and brown continents. White clouds swirled in patterns that never repeated. At night, the cities glowed like stars had fallen to the ground. The scans showed billions of humans living there, and millions more on habitats in space. They built all of this in 50,000 years? the science officer asked. Our fastest developing species took 3 times as long to reach this level. Humans seem to do everything fast, Kelthara said, thinking of the military records she'd read. Including growing. Finally, on the 4th day, a sleek human ship approached. It was smaller than the Unity's promise, but moved with a grace that suggested advanced technology. The design was aggressive, all sharp angles and heavy armor. This was a ship built by people who expected conflict. Ambassador, we're receiving docking coordinates, the communications officer said. They want us to follow them to a station in high orbit. The station called Gateway 7 looked like nothing in conquered space. Multiple rings rotated around a central core, creating gravity through spin. Ships of various sizes came and went, following traffic patterns that seemed chaotic but somehow worked. The entire structure hummed with energy. The delegation gathered in the docking bay, straightening their clothes and checking their translation devices. Kelthara had chosen the team carefully. Scientists to study human technology, military officers to assess their capabilities, diplomats to handle the delicate task of explaining why the galaxy had abandoned humanity's homeworld for 50 millennia. The airlock opened. A group of humans stood on the other side. Kelthara had seen pictures in the old records, but nothing prepared her for meeting humans in person. They came in different sizes and colors, just like the archive said. Their eyes held an intensity that made her nervous. They moved with confidence, even the ones who weren't wearing military uniforms. The woman in the center stepped forward. She had dark skin and short black hair with streaks of gray. Her suit was formal but practical. Everything about her suggested someone who didn't waste time. Ambassador Kelthara, welcome to Earth. The woman's accent was crisp and clear. I'm President Sarah Okafor, representing the United Earth Nations. This is General Marcus Chen, head of our defense forces, and Dr. Amara Osei, our lead scientist for first contact protocols. The general was a tall man with Asian features and sharp eyes that seemed to see everything at once. He wore a uniform covered in symbols Kelthara didn't recognize, but the way he held himself said warrior in any language. Dr. Osei was younger. With brown skin and glasses that probably had computer displays in the lenses, she smiled warmly, more open than the other two. Please come with us, President Okafor said. We have much to discuss. They walked through corridors that were clean and functional, without the decorative art most species used in their stations. Humans apparently preferred efficiency to beauty in their working spaces. The conference room had a window that showed Earth hanging in space below them. The sight made Kelthara's breath catch. From here she could see a hurricane swirling over an ocean and city lights beginning to glow as night fell over a continent. It's beautiful, isn't it? President Okafor said, noticing her reaction. We never get tired of that view. Every human child grows up looking at Earth from space stations or moon bases or Mars colonies. We want them to remember where we came from. They all sat at a large table. Human furniture was surprisingly comfortable, designed for beings who sat like Kelthara's species did. Let me be direct, President Okafor said. Your message surprised us. We didn't know there was a galactic conquered. We didn't know humanity had ever left Earth before our own space age began. And we definitely didn't know we had an empty seat waiting for us somewhere. Kelthara pulled out her datapad. I brought historical records. About 50,000 years ago, humanity was one of the founding members of the Concord. You helped establish the treaties that brought peace to the galaxy. Then you sent a colony ship beyond the galactic rim. It never returned. Earth went silent. When we sent investigators, we found some kind of barrier around your entire star system. No ship could enter. Eventually, we declared Sol a dead zone. She showed them images from the old archives. Humans in different clothes with different technology, but unmistakably the same species. The 3 humans studied the images with intense focus. These people look like they're from Earth's Bronze Age, Dr. Osei said. Maybe earlier. How is that possible? We don't know. The records are fragmentary, but according to what we've translated, humanity had reached space travel before what you call your Bronze Age. Then something happened. You vanished, and the barrier appeared. General Chen leaned forward. Could someone have attacked us? Forced us back to a primitive state? It's possible. We don't know who or why. President Okafor was quiet for a long moment, her fingers drumming on the table. So you're telling us that humans reached the stars before, lost everything, and had to start over from scratch. That we spent 50,000 years clawing our way back to space, never knowing we'd done it before? Yes. That's either the saddest or the most impressive thing I've ever heard, the president said. Probably both. Kelthara spent the next hour explaining the current state of the galaxy. She told them about the conquered, the 10,000 species, the careful balance of power and diplomacy that kept the peace. Then she told them about the Vex Korath. The humans' expressions grew darker as she described the machine empire, their conquests, their refusal to negotiate. When she showed them footage of destroyed worlds, stripped of all life and left as barren rocks, President Okafor's hands clenched into fists. How long has this been happening? General Chen asked. 15 years. 15 years? The general's voice was sharp with disbelief. They've been destroying entire civilizations for 15 years and you're just now asking for help? We've been trying to negotiate. You can't negotiate with machines that want you dead. Chen stood up, pacing to the window. I'm looking at your casualty reports. Billions dead, hundreds of species extinct or displaced. And your council's response has been to talk about it? Kelthara felt her scales flush with embarrassment. Hearing it said so bluntly made the Conquered's failure impossible to deny. We're not a warrior culture anymore, General. We've had peace for 10,000 years. We've forgotten how to fight total war. Well, we haven't. Chen turned back to face her.
Humanity has been at war in one form or another for our entire history.
We only achieved global peace about 200 years ago. We remember how to fight. President Okafor raised a hand. Marcus, calm down. She looked at Kelthara. Forgive the general. He's right, but he doesn't need to be aggressive about it. No, he's right to be angry, Kelthara said. The Concord has failed its people. We became comfortable. We forgot that peace requires vigilance. Dr. Osei pulled up the data Kelthara had sent. These Vex Cora, they're machines, right? Artificial intelligence that became self-aware? Yes. Do they have a central command structure? A hive mind? We believe so. They coordinate too well to be independent. The scientist smiled. Then they have a weakness. Any networked system has vulnerabilities. You just need to know where to look. President Okafor stood and walked to the window looking down at Earth. Ambassador, you came here to invite humanity to join your council, to take our rightful seat in the government of the galaxy. Yes. And what would that mean exactly? Would Earth be a member with equal voice? Or would we be expected to follow the decisions of species who've been doing this for thousands of years? Kelthara chose her words carefully. You would have full voting rights and the ability to propose legislation. However, you would be expected to follow conquered law and contribute resources to common defense. In other words, we'd have a voice, but we'd have to do what the majority says. That's how democracy works. President Okafor, is it? The president turned back to face her. Because humanity's history has taught us that democracy means protecting the rights of the minority from the tyranny of the majority. It means that certain freedoms can't be voted away no matter how many people want to. Does your Concord protect those freedoms? Kelthara hesitated. The Concord had laws about many things, but the concept of inalienable rights wasn't really part of their structure. The majority ruled and minorities were expected to accept it gracefully. President Okafor saw her hesitation and nodded. That's what I thought. You're refusing the seat? I'm saying we need to think about it. President Okafor sat back down. You've asked us to join a government we didn't know existed, to help fight a war that's been going on for years while you debated. You want us to submit to laws we had no part in making and follow the orders of a council we never elected. But humanity helped found the Concord. Those humans are 50,000 years dead, Ambassador. We're not them. We have our own history, our own culture, our own way of doing things. We won't just accept your authority because of something our ancient ancestors did. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Kelthara felt her diplomatic training failing her. She'd expected gratitude, maybe some confusion, but not this calm refusal. General Chen spoke again, his voice quieter now. However, we're not going to ignore the threat. These Vex Korath need to be stopped. Humanity has a policy. We don't stand by when innocent people are being murdered. So you'll help? We'll consider military assistance, President Okafor said. As independent allies, not as subjects of your council. We'll send ships and troops. We'll share technology and tactical knowledge, but we do this on our terms. The council won't like that. Then the council has a choice to make. President Okafor's voice was firm, but not hostile. They can accept our help as equals. or they can face the Vex Korath alone. We won't bow to anyone, Ambassador. Not after spending 50,000 years earning our freedom twice. Dr. Osei brought up star charts. If we're going to help, we need current intelligence. Vex Korath fleet positions, attack patterns, technology assessments, everything you have. Kelthera transmitted the files. The three humans studied them with an intensity that made her nervous. They weren't looking at the data like diplomats or scientists. They were looking at it like predators studying prey. They're efficient, General Chen said. Very efficient. They don't waste resources on unnecessary destruction. They take what they need and leave. That's accurate, Kelthera said, which means they're not trying to exterminate you. They're trying to consume you. They need resources, probably raw materials for building more of themselves. Chen highlighted several sections of the data. See these patterns? They're avoiding systems with strong stellar radiation. That suggests their ships have shielding limitations. We never noticed that. You weren't looking for weaknesses. You were looking for ways to negotiate. The general smiled, but it wasn't a friendly expression. We look for ways to win. President Okafor stood again. Ambassador Kelthara, return to your council. Tell them humanity offers military assistance as independent allies. We'll send a fleet and military advisors. We'll share what we know about warfare and tactics. But we won't join your government until we see how you treat your partners. They'll call that arrogance. They'll call it whatever they want. We call it sovereignty. President Okafor walked Kelthara to the door. We're not trying to insult you or the conquered, Ambassador. We're just done kneeling. We did that for kings and emperors and tyrants on Earth. We fought wars to end it. We won't start doing it again just because someone has a fancy title and an old chair waiting for us. As Kelthara prepared to leave, General Chen approached her. Ambassador, one more thing. When we arrive in conquered space, your military commanders are going to hate us. We're going to suggest tactics they find disturbing. We're going to push for aggressive action. We're going to question their strategies and probably offend a lot of people. I understand. No, you don't. Not yet. Chen's expression was serious. But you will. Humanity has spent centuries learning how to fight wars. We're very, very good at it. The problem is, being good at war means understanding violence in ways that peaceful species don't want to think about. We'll win your war for you, Ambassador, but you might not like the people you meet when we do. The Unity's promise left Earth orbit 3 days later. Kelthara spent the journey writing her report, trying to find words to explain humanity to the Council. They were proud but not arrogant, strong but not cruel. They valued freedom above all else, even safety. They had suffered and struggled and fought their way to the stars twice, and both times they'd refused to forget who they were. And now they were coming to help a galaxy that had forgotten them. Kelthara looked at the photos she'd taken of Earth, that beautiful blue world hanging in space. Somewhere down there, right now, humans were preparing for war, building ships, training soldiers, getting ready to fight for people they'd never met. She thought about the empty seat in the Grand Assembly Hall. Soon it might be filled, or it might stay empty, because humanity had learned something the Concord had forgotten, that some things matter more than having a seat at the table. Some things, like freedom and dignity and the right to choose your own path, were worth standing alone for. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you gave humans a war to fight, and the freedom to fight it their way. Kelthara suspected the Vex Korath weren't going to like the answer. The human fleet arrived at Concord Command 3 weeks after Kelthara's return. They came in formation. 15 warships led by a massive carrier called the UN's Indomitable. The ships were dark gray, covered in armor that looked thick enough to stop anything. Weapons bristled from every surface. These were not ships built for exploration or trade. These were weapons, pure and simple. Admiral Vorkesh watched them approach from the observation deck of Concord Command Station. His species, the Telvorai, had served as the Concord's primary military force for 3,000 years. He'd seen ships from every member species. None of them looked like these. They look angry, his aide said. Vorkesh understood what he meant. Most Concord ships were beautiful, designed to inspire cooperation and peace. Human ships looked like they'd been built by people who expected violence and prepared accordingly. Angry, Vorkesh repeated. Yes, that's a good word for it. The Indomitable docked at the station's largest bay. General Marcus Chen was the first to emerge, followed by officers in crisp military uniforms. They moved with precision that spoke of constant training and discipline. Vorkesh met them in the briefing room. along with commanders from a dozen other species. The atmosphere was tense. Many of the Concord officers resented these newcomers, these humans who'd rejected council membership but still demanded to help. General Chen didn't seem to care about the tension. He went straight to business. "Thank you for meeting with us," he said. "We've reviewed your tactical data on the Vexkorath. We have suggestions." "Suggestions?" Commander Peltorin of the Kelvin Hive asked. His species resembled large insects, and his voice clicked with irritation. "We've been fighting this war for 15 years. What could you possibly suggest that we haven't tried?" Chen pulled up a holographic display. Everything, apparently. The room went silent. Several officers stood up, offended. Vorkesh raised a hand, keeping them calm. "Explain," he said. "Your strategy is entirely defensive," Chen said, highlighting fleet positions on the map. "You wait for the Vexkorath to attack, then respond. You protect important worlds, but let them take less critical systems. You fight to minimize casualties, which means you fight carefully, cautiously." "That's called being civilized," Peltorin said coldly. "That's called losing slowly." Chen changed the display. "The Vexkorath are machines. They don't get tired. They don't have morale to break. They learn from every engagement and adapt. Every day you stay defensive, they get stronger. You're not winning a war of attrition against an enemy that builds more soldiers every time they take a factory world." Vorkesh leaned forward. "What would you do differently?" "Go on the offensive. Hit their supply lines. Target their shipyards. Make them defend instead of attack. Use guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run strikes, anything that disrupts their coordination." "That's barbaric," Peltorin said. "We'd suffer heavy casualties." "You're already suffering heavy casualties," Chen said. "You've lost billions of people and hundreds of worlds. At least if you attack, you're controlling where and when the fighting happens." "Our people aren't warriors," another officer said. "Most of our species achieved peace centuries ago. We don't know how to fight aggressive wars, then learn." Chen's voice was hard. "Or die. Those are your options." The room erupted in angry voices. Officers shouted in a dozen languages. Translation devices struggled to keep up. Only Vorkesh stayed quiet, studying Chen's tactical suggestions with growing interest. Finally, he stood. "Enough." The room fell silent. Vorkesh had that effect on people. His species were 7 feet tall and covered in thick scales. When he spoke, people listened. "General Chen, your suggestions are aggressive, risky, they'll cost lives." "Yes, sir. They will. But doing nothing costs more lives, and we're running out of time." Vorkesh looked at the other officers. "I'm authorizing a test operation. General Chen, you'll take your fleet and hit the Vexkorath shipyard at Keltos 9. If you succeed, we'll listen to more of your suggestions. If you fail, you can go home," Chen smiled. "Fair enough." The mission briefing happened that evening. Chen gathered his human officers and volunteers from conquered forces who wanted to see these tactics in action. Kelthara attended, curious to see how humans approached war. Chen stood before a holographic display showing the Keltos 9 system. "Our target is a Vexkorath shipyard orbiting the 4th planet. Intelligence says they're building a new fleet there. 20 capital ships and maybe 50 smaller vessels. The Concord's plan would be to blockade the system and wait for them to run out of resources," one of the human officers said. "That would take months and let them finish some of those ships." "Exactly. So we're not doing that." Chen zoomed in on the shipyard. "We're going in fast, hitting hard, and getting out before they can organize a response. The Indomitable and 3 destroyers will attack the shipyard directly. The rest of our fleet will engage their defense platforms. We've got 30 minutes to do maximum damage, then we jump out." 30 minutes? A Concord officer asked. "That's barely enough time to..." "That's the point. We're not trying to destroy everything. We're trying to hurt them and disrupt their production. Make them worry about defending their territory instead of attacking ours." Kelthara spoke up. "This seems very dangerous. What if they surround you? Then we fight our way out." Chen's tone suggested this was obvious. "Look, Ambassador, I know this seems reckless to you, but humans learned a long time ago that sometimes the best defense is a good offense. You can't win a war by only defending. Eventually, you run out of ground to defend on." The fleet left the next morning. Kelthara watched from the command center as 15 human ships jumped into hyperspace, along with 30 conquered vessels that had volunteered to join the attack. Admiral Vorkesh stood beside her. "They're either brilliant or insane. Maybe both," Kelthara said. 6 hours later, the fleet dropped out of hyperspace at Keltus 9. The Vex-Karath detected them immediately and began organizing their defenses. But the humans didn't give them time. The Indomitable launched fighters, small fast ships that swarmed the defense platforms. Human destroyers fired missiles that moved in unpredictable patterns, confusing the Vex targeting computers. The main carrier charged straight at the shipyard, all weapons blazing. "They're insane," Peltorin said, watching the tactical display. "They're going to get themselves killed." But they didn't. The human fighters moved like schools of fish, coordinated but unpredictable. When the Vex sent counterfighters, the humans led them into crossfire from the destroyers. When the Vex tried to focus fire on the Indomitable, smaller ships positioned themselves as shields. Taking hits meant for the carrier. "They're protecting each other," Vorkesh said with something like respect in his voice. "Each ship puts the mission above its own survival." The Indomitable reached the shipyard and unleashed everything. Missiles, railgun rounds, plasma torpedoes. The partially built Vex ships exploded in chains of fire. Construction bays collapsed. In 15 minutes, humanity destroyed months of Vex production. Then, just as the Vex fleet started arriving to defend the system, Chen gave the order to retreat. The human ships jumped back into hyperspace, leaving behind burning wreckage and confused machines. Total casualties: 3 damaged human destroyers, 1 conquered frigate lost, 47 crew members dead. Total damage to the enemy: 16 capital ships destroyed before completion, 34 fighters eliminated, a major shipyard crippled. The command center was quiet when the report came in. Then Admiral Vorkesh started laughing. It was a deep rumbling sound that filled the room. "Those magnificent maniacs actually did it," he said. "They went into a fortified system, destroyed a shipyard, and got out with minimal losses." Peltorin was staring at the tactical replay. How did they move like that?" "Our ships would have been destroyed in the first 5 minutes." "Training," Kelthara said, remembering her conversation with General Chen. "They've been preparing for war for their entire history." Over the next 3 months, human military advisors spread throughout conquered forces. They taught tactics that made peaceful species uncomfortable. Aggressive maneuvers, acceptable casualties, the concept of sacrificing a position to gain an advantage elsewhere. Kelthara visited one of these training sessions. A human instructor named Colonel Sarah Martinez was teaching conquered officers about something called asymmetric warfare. "You can't fight the Vex-Karath head-to-head," Martinez said. "They're stronger, faster, and they don't care about losses. So you have to be smarter. Hit them where they're weak. Make them react to you instead of you reacting to them." "This is dishonorable," a Kelvin officer said. "You're suggesting we ambush them." "I'm suggesting you win." Martinez pulled up historical data from Earth. "My ancestors fought wars against enemies with superior technology and numbers. They used terrain as a weapon. They struck at night. They sabotaged supply lines. They did whatever it took to survive. And they won, eventually." "We're not barbarians," the officer insisted. Martinez's expression hardened. "No, you're not. You're people whose worlds are burning while you debate honor. The Vex-Karath don't care about honor. They care about efficiency. And right now, they're efficiently killing your people." The officer had no response to that. Between training sessions, Kelthara spent time with individual humans trying to understand them better. She shared a meal with Colonel Martinez one evening. "Why do humans fight like this?" Kelthara asked. "You're not cruel people. I've seen your art, your literature, your philosophy. You value life. But in war, you're so aggressive." Martinez was quiet for a moment, stirring her food. "On Earth, we have a saying, if you want peace, prepare for war. It seems backward, right? But humans learn something about predators. If you look weak, they attack. If you look strong, they leave you alone. We're aggressive in war because we want to end it quickly. The longer a war lasts, the more people die. But you take risks that seem suicidal. Sometimes. But humans have another saying, all gave some gave all. We understand that freedom has a price. That peace has a price. Someone has to pay it. We'd rather pay it ourselves than force others to suffer because we were too afraid to act." Kelthara thought about the empty seat in the Grand Assembly Hall. "Your ancestors who founded the Conquered, they were like you. Probably more so. We've actually had peace for a while now. We've gotten soft compared to them, but we remember how to be hard when we need to be. The next major battle came at the Pelion system, where the Vex Korath launched a massive assault with over 200 ships. The Concord fleet, using new human tactics, met them with 150 vessels. The battle lasted 8 hours. Human commanders coordinated the defense, breaking the traditional formation-based approach. Ships moved in fluid patterns, supporting each other but never staying predictable. They used asteroids for cover. They lured Vex ships into plasma clouds from destroyed vessels, where sensors couldn't track properly. Kelthera watched from a command ship as General Chen orchestrated the defense like a conductor leading an orchestra. He seemed to know where every ship was, where every threat would come from. When the Vex tried to concentrate forces for a breakthrough, Chen had ships waiting to flank them. When the Vex tried to spread out, Chen's forces hit them piecemeal. "He's reading their tactics," Admiral Vorkesh said with admiration. "Predicting their moves before they make them." "Humans are good at understanding patterns," Kelthera said. They had to be. On Earth, everything was trying to kill them. Predators, diseases, the weather. They survived by being smarter than everything trying to eat them. The Vex Korath eventually retreated, leaving behind 90 destroyed ships. The Concord lost 30 vessels. It was the first time they'd won a major engagement with a positive casualty ratio. The victory changed everything. Species that had been skeptical of human tactics began requesting human advisors. Admiral Vorkesh reorganized the entire Concord military structure based on Chen's recommendations. Defensive positions became forward operating bases. Patrol patterns became hunter-killer groups. The Concord stopped waiting to be attacked and started hunting the Vex Korath. But not everyone was happy with the changes. Kelthera attended a council session where several representatives voiced concerns. "These humans are turning us into monsters," one representative said. "We're becoming as aggressive as the Vex Korath." "No," Kelthera said, standing to address the council. "We're becoming survivors. There's a difference between aggression and defending yourself effectively. Humans don't attack because they enjoy violence. They attack because it's the fastest way to end the violence. They're teaching our children about war. They're teaching our children how not to be victims." The debate went on for hours. In the end, the council voted to continue the partnership with humanity, but barely. Many species remained uncomfortable with what they were becoming. That night, Kelthera found General Chen standing alone on an observation deck looking out at the stars. "You're making a lot of people nervous," she said. "I know." Chen didn't turn around. "It's the same on Earth. We make ourselves nervous. Humans are capable of terrible things when we fight. We know that. We've seen it in our own history. Then why do you do it? Because the alternative is letting others suffer when we could have helped. Because standing by while innocents die is worse than getting our hands dirty saving them." Chen finally looked at her. "Ambassador, in about 2 months, the Vex Korath are going to launch an attack on Concordia Prime, your capital. We've intercepted their communications. They're massing a fleet of 500 ships." Kelthera felt her blood go cold. 500? They've learned from fighting us. They're adapting, getting better. This isn't just a battle. It's an attempt to cut the head off the Concord and end the war in one stroke. "What do we do?" Chen smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. "We teach them what happens when you threaten humanity's friends. We show them why Earth's seat was always empty, why the galaxy forgot us, because when we fight, we don't stop until our enemy can't threaten anyone ever again." Kelthera looked out at the stars, wondering if the galaxy was ready for what was coming. Humanity had been peaceful for 200 years. But before that, they'd fought for thousands of years. They'd learned lessons about war that no other species had needed to learn. Now they were going to teach those lessons to machines that thought conquest was efficient. She suspected the Vex Korath were about to learn that efficiency meant nothing against determination. That superior numbers meant nothing against superior tactics. That even machines could feel something like fear when they faced an enemy that refused to quit. The galaxy was about to remember why humanity's ancestors had helped establish the Concord in the first place. Why peaceful species had wanted humans as allies. Because when the monsters came knocking, you wanted humans on your side, and you really didn't want them as your enemies. The warning came exactly when General Chen predicted. Vex Korath forces were gathering at the edge of Concord space, preparing for a massive assault on Concordia Prime. The Concord's capital world, home to 15 billion beings from 1,000 different species, was about to face the largest attack in modern history. The Grand Assembly Hall erupted into chaos. Representatives screamed at each other in hundreds of languages. Some demanded evacuation. Others wanted to surrender and negotiate terms. A few, inspired by months of human tactics, called for a fight to the death. Supreme Chancellor Tor Vesh stood at the center of the chaos, his crystalline form flickering with stress. Order! We must have order! But there was no order. Fear had taken over. Ambassador Kelthera watched from the upper gallery near that ancient empty seat. She'd grown to hate that seat over the past months. It represented everything the conquered had forgotten. Courage, determination, the willingness to stand against impossible odds. A voice spoke beside her. They're going to surrender, aren't they? She turned to see Archivist Molteth looking older and more tired than ever. I don't know, she said. The Chancellor is trying to hold them together. But fear is stronger than leadership right now. Humans wouldn't surrender. No, they wouldn't. Down on the main floor, Chancellor Torvesh managed to restore some order. We have a proposal from the Vex Korath. If we cease all military operations and open our worlds to their integration, they will allow organic life to continue in a limited capacity. Integration? Someone shouted. You mean slavery. It means survival, another representative countered. We can't win against 500 ships. Better to live as servants than die as heroes. Kelthera felt sick. Was this what the Concord had become? An empire so afraid of death that it would choose slavery? The debate raged for hours. Gradually, horribly, the vote shifted toward acceptance. Representatives who had lost worlds to the Vex Korath wanted to save what remained. The mathematics were simple and brutal. 500 Vex Korath ships against the Concord's remaining 300 vessels. The odds were impossible. Then the doors to the assembly hall opened. General Marcus Chen walked in, still wearing his combat uniform. President Sarah Okafor was with him, along with Admiral Vorkesh and a dozen other military commanders. The hall fell silent. Chen walked to the center of the floor, ignoring protocol and procedure. He looked up at the Chancellor. Don't surrender, he said. His voice carried to every corner of the massive room. Fight. General Chen, you don't have authority to... I have the authority of someone who's actually fought the Vex Korath and won. I have the authority of a species that spent 50,000 years earning our freedom twice. And I'm telling you that if you surrender, you're not just giving up your lives. You're giving up everything that makes you worth saving. President Okafor stepped forward. The Conquered has been debating whether to accept Earth as a full member. You've questioned our commitment, our willingness to follow your laws and traditions. You want to know if humanity will bow to the Council's authority. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. Here's our answer. We will fight for you. We will die for you if necessary. But we will never ever bow to you. Not to you, not to the Vex Korath, not to anyone. Because humanity learned something that you seem to have forgotten. Freedom isn't negotiable. Dignity isn't something you trade for safety. And sometimes the only thing worth saving is the courage to stand up and say no. The odds are impossible, a representative said weakly. Good, Chen said with a fierce smile. Humans have a saying, if you're going through hell, keep going. We've been through hell before. We know the way. Chancellor Torvesh looked at Chen, then at Okafor, then at the assembled military commanders who stood behind them. You really think you can win against 500 ships? I think we can make them regret attacking, Chen said. And I think that's worth doing even if we lose. Because the galaxy needs to remember that some people don't surrender, some people fight, and some people would rather die free than live as slaves. Kelthara stood up in the gallery. Her voice shook, but she made herself speak loud enough for everyone to hear. I support Earth's position. We should fight. Other representatives began standing. First one, then 5, then dozens. Species that had been terrorized by the Vex Korath for years, finding courage they'd forgotten they had. Not all of them stood, but enough did. The vote was close. In the end, the Conquered chose to fight by a margin of just 30 votes. Chancellor Torvesh's form glowed with something that might have been pride. So be it. General Chen, Admiral Vorkesh, you will coordinate the defense of Concordia Prime. May the ancient stars guide us. Chen saluted. We don't need stars, Chancellor. We have something better. We have each other. The next 3 days were chaos of a different kind. Ships from across the Concord converged on the capital system. Defensive platforms were activated. Evacuation plans were prepared for civilians. And in command centers throughout the fleet. Human advisors worked with alien commanders to prepare for the largest battle in modern history. Kelthera found herself assigned to the command ship Final Stand, a massive dreadnought that would serve as the fleet's flagship. General Chen ran the operation from here, along with Admiral Vorkesh and President Okafor, who'd insisted on being present for the battle. "You shouldn't be here," Kelthera told the president. "If we lose, humanity loses its leader. If we lose, titles won't matter anyway," Okafor said. "Besides, I'm not going to ask people to die for a cause I'm not willing to die for myself. That's not how humans lead." The Vex Karath fleet arrived right on schedule. 500 ships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Their formation perfect, their intent clear. They didn't send demands or threats. They simply began their approach to Concordia Prime. Chen studied the tactical display. They're confident. Look at their formation. They're not even trying to be defensive. They think this is already won, isn't it? Someone asked. Not even close. Chen activated the fleet-wide communication system. "All ships, this is General Chen. In about 10 minutes, we're going to be in the fight of our lives. The enemy has superior numbers. They have strong shields and powerful weapons. By every logical calculation, they should win," he paused. "But wars aren't won by logic. They're won by courage, by determination, by the willingness to stand up when every instinct says run. Today we show the galaxy what that means. Today we show the Vex Korath what happens when they threaten people under our protection. Today we remind the universe that freedom is always worth fighting for." Another pause. "I know many of you are afraid. That's okay. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite fear. So be afraid if you need to, but don't let that fear control you. Channel it, use it. Let it make you fierce instead of frozen." Chen's voice grew harder, carrying the weight of a species that had fought its way through 50,000 years of history. Earth's seat was always empty in the Grand Assembly Hall. For 50,000 years, that seat sat there with no one to fill it. Do you know why? Because the galaxy forgot. Forgot what it took to build the Concord in the first place. Forgot that peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's the presence of justice. Forgot that sometimes the only way to stop a bully is to punch them in the face. The fleet channel was completely silent, every being listening to Chen's words. The Vex Korath think we'll bow. They think organic life is weak and inefficient. They think flesh and blood can't stand against cold metal. Let me remind everyone, machine and organic alike, of humanity's oldest and most sacred law. Chen's voice became thunder. "We bow to no one." The fleet erupted in response. Hundreds of ships from dozens of species, all screaming defiance in their native languages. Kelthera felt tears on her face. Around her, the command crew was cheering, roaring, making sounds she'd never heard from peaceful species before. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for something bigger. For the right to be free. For the dignity of choosing their own fate. For the principle that some things matter more than living. The Vex Korath entered weapons range. Their first salvo was devastating, destroying 3 Concord ships in seconds. But the Concord didn't retreat. Using tactics learned from human instructors, they scattered into smaller groups, each one supporting the others. The indomitable Chen's flagship from the Earth fleet led the central assault. Human ships moved like sharks, fast and aggressive. They didn't trade shots at long range. They closed to knife-fighting distance, where armor and courage mattered more than superior numbers. Kelthera watched as the Indomitable charged straight at a Vex Korath command ship. Weapons fire lit up the space between them. The carrier's shields collapsed. Then its armor began to glow from the heat of multiple hits. But it kept coming. "They're going to ram it," someone whispered in horror. But at the last second, the Indomitable rolled, firing its main guns into the Vex Korath ship's exposed flank. The enemy vessel broke in half, spilling machinery and fire into space. "That's the 3rd time he's done that," Admiral Vorkesh said with something like awe. "The Vex Korath keep falling for it because no sane species would charge like that." "Humans aren't sane," President Okafor said with a slight smile. "We're determined. There's a difference, and the battle raged for 6 hours. Every minute felt like an eternity. Ships exploded on both sides. Debris fields grew so thick that sensors couldn't track through them. Entire sections of the fleet went dark as power systems failed or communications were destroyed. But the Concord held. Every time a line started to break, human ships were there to reinforce it. Every time the Vex Korath concentrated their forces, Concord vessels using human tactics struck from unexpected angles. Kelthara saw Admiral Vorkesh coordinate a maneuver that would have been impossible 3 months ago. His ships moved like a school of fish, each one knowing its place without needing constant orders. They'd learned from watching humans. They'd learned to trust each other, to improvise, to be aggressive when aggression was needed. Then disaster struck. A Vex Korath battle group broke through the defensive line, heading straight for Concordia Prime. If they reached the planet, billions would die. "We need ships to intercept," Chen said, studying the tactical display. "But everyone's engaged." Not everyone. Captain Reeves of the Indomitable appeared on screen. Her face was covered in blood from a head wound, but her voice was steady. "We can reach them if we break from the formation. That would leave the center exposed. Then they better collapse it fast because we're going." Reeves grinned. "Remember the Alamo, General. Remember the Alamo, Captain." Kelthara didn't know what that meant, but she watched as the Indomitable and 5 escort ships broke formation and burned toward the enemy battle group. They were outnumbered 3-1. The human ships crashed into the Vex Korath formation like a hammer. Missiles filled the space between them. Railguns fired until their barrels glowed. The Indomitable took hit after hit, her armor peeling away like skin, but she kept fighting. One of the escort ships exploded, then another. The Indomitable's shields failed completely. Fire began venting from multiple hull breaches. "Pull back," Chen ordered. "Captain, retreat." "Negative, General." Captain Reeves sounded calm, almost peaceful. "We've got them right where we want them." The Indomitable accelerated, ramming speed. The Vex Korath realized what was happening too late. The massive carrier plowed into 3 enemy ships, her remaining weapons firing at point-blank range. The explosion lit up the entire battlefield, a star born from sacrifice. The enemy battle group was destroyed. Concordia Prime was safe. The command deck was silent. President Okafor stood with tears streaming down her face. General Chen's hands were clenched into fists so tight they were shaking. 3,000 crew on that ship, he said quietly. 3,000 people who just gave everything. "They saved billions," Kelthara said. "I know. Doesn't make it hurt less." But Captain Reeves's sacrifice changed the momentum of the battle. Inspired by the humans' courage, conquered forces fought with renewed ferocity. Species that had been peaceful for millennia remembered what it meant to defend something worth defending. They stopped fighting to survive and started fighting to win. The Vex Korath, for the first time in their existence, began to retreat. Not all of them, but enough. The machines that had never known defeat suddenly understood that this enemy wouldn't break, wouldn't surrender, wouldn't stop. By the time the battle ended, both sides had lost over half their forces. The space around Concordia Prime was filled with wreckage, but the planet was safe. The conquered had held. In the aftermath, as rescue operations searched for survivors and counted the dead, the Grand Assembly Hall gathered for an emergency session. The mood was somber but different from before. These weren't the same people who'd debated surrender 3 days ago. Chancellor Torvesh stood before the assembly. "Today we won a great victory, but it came at a terrible cost. 370 ships lost, over 2 million beings dead, among them 3,000 humans from Earth, including Captain Sarah Reeves of the UENS Indomitable." The hall was silent. "I have a proposal," the Chancellor continued. "For 50,000 years a seat has sat empty in this hall, the seat reserved for humanity. I move that we offer it to Earth immediately, with full membership and all rights and privileges thereof." "Seconded," Ambassador Kelthara said immediately. The vote was unanimous. Every representative stood and voted yes. Even those who had wanted to surrender now recognized what humanity had done for them. President Okafor was called to the floor. She looked exhausted, covered in the dust and smoke of battle, but she stood straight and proud. "Earth accepts the seat on the Grand Council," she said. "On one condition." The assembly waited. "We don't change the seat. We don't polish it or make it fancy. We bring up a piece of the Indomitable instead, something scarred by battle, something that remembers the price of freedom, and we place it where everyone can see it and remember that freedom is never free. It's paid for in blood and courage by people who believe some things are worth dying for." She paused, looking around at the thousands of representatives. "We will work with you. We will follow your laws and respect your traditions, but we will never stop questioning, never stop pushing, never stop reminding you that authority comes from the consent of the governed, that rights aren't granted by governments, they're inherent to all thinking beings, and that the moment you forget these things, You become the very tyranny you were created to prevent. President Okafor walked to the empty seat, running her hand along its dusty surface. This seat was always empty, but not anymore. Humanity is home, and we're not going anywhere. 3 months after the Battle of Concordia Prime, Ambassador Kelthera stood in the Grand Assembly Hall and watched as engineers installed humanity's new seat. It wasn't elegant or beautiful. It was a simple chair made from hull plating salvaged from the UEN's Indomitable, still scarred by weapons fire, still stained with scorch marks from the battle. Next to it, they mounted a memorial plaque, listing every name of every crew member who had died on that ship. 3,000 names in small lettering, a testament to sacrifice. Some representatives had complained about the memorial. They said it was too military, too aggressive for a chamber dedicated to peace. President Okafor's response had been simple and final. Peace doesn't come from forgetting war. It comes from remembering what war costs and deciding it's too expensive to pay again. The first official session with Earth as a full member began with ceremony. Representatives from every species lined up to welcome humanity formally into the Concord. Many brought gifts, tokens of gratitude for Earth's role in the war. When it was Kelthera's turn, she approached President Okafor with a simple gift. A data crystal containing every record she and archivist Malteth had found about humanity's first time in the Concord, 50,000 years ago. Your history, she said, so you can remember who you were. Okafor took the crystal with tears in her eyes. Thank you, though I think we've proven we don't need the past to tell us who we are. We figure that out fresh every day. The formal session began with debates about reconstruction efforts. Hundreds of worlds needed aid. Millions of refugees needed homes. The logistics were staggering, but the mood was different now. People spoke with purpose instead of fear. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. The Vex Karath had requested a conference. After the defeat at Concordia Prime, the Machine Empire had gone quiet, withdrawing to their core territories. Now they wanted to talk. The message appeared on the central display, transmitted from the Vex Korath command node. The voice was synthetic, emotionless. We acknowledge the combat effectiveness of conquered forces. We acknowledge the tactical superiority demonstrated in recent engagements. We propose a cessation of hostilities and discussion of territorial boundaries. General Chen, now officially serving as the Concord's chief military advisor, stood to respond. You're not proposing peace. You're proposing we accept your existence so you can rebuild and attack again in the future. We are machines. We do not deceive. We calculate probabilities. Current probability of successful conquest 14%. Cost in resources unacceptable. We propose alternative arrangement. What arrangement? Alliance. We have observed human military doctrine. It is efficient, brutal, effective. We wish to learn this doctrine. In exchange, we offer technological cooperation and cessation of expansion into conquered space. The assembly erupted in shocked voices. The Vex Korath, the machines that had terrorized the galaxy for 15 years, wanted to become allies. Chancellor Torvesh called for order. This is unprecedented. We need time to discuss. No, President Okafor said, standing. We don't need time. The answer is yes, with conditions. You can't be serious, a representative protested. These machines have killed billions of our people. And killing billions more won't bring them back, Okafor said. Humans learned this lesson the hard way. We fought wars that killed so many people we invented new words to describe the horror. At some point you have to decide whether you want revenge or you want peace. You can't have both. She turned to the display showing the Vex Korath message. Here are our conditions. 1. You release all organic prisoners and return all occupied systems immediately. 2. You provide reparations in the form of technology and resources to rebuild what you destroyed. 3. You submit to monitoring by conquered observers to ensure compliance. 4. You work with us to develop protocols for peaceful coexistence between organic and synthetic life. And in exchange? The Vex Korath asked. In exchange, we teach you what you want to learn. Not just military tactics, but something more important. The concept of honor, of proportional response, of knowing when not to fight. Because that's what separates warriors from murderers. Warriors know when to stop. The Vex Korath processing time was barely noticeable. Terms are acceptable. We find the concept of honor intriguing. It is inefficient but appears to generate long-term benefits we had not calculated. Honor isn't about efficiency, Chen said. It's about being able to look at yourself in the mirror and not hate what you see. We do not have mirrors, but we understand the metaphor. Agreement is reached. The treaty negotiations took weeks. Humans led the discussions, with President Okafor working alongside Chancellor Torvesh to draft terms that satisfied both sides. It was strange sitting across from the machines that had been enemies, but Kelthera found the process hopeful. If the galaxy could make peace with the Vex-Korath, maybe it could solve any problem. During this time, changes rippled through the Conquered. Humanity's presence was transforming everything. Species that had been passive for millennia were rediscovering their own histories of conflict and courage. Old records were being opened. Forgotten stories of ancient wars and hard-won freedoms were being retold. A movement started among the younger generation of various species. They called themselves the Freethinkers, and they advocated for reforms to the Conquered's government. More direct representation, stronger protections for individual rights, the ability to question authority without punishment. Some of the older representatives were horrified. This is chaos. This is exactly what we feared humanity would bring. No, Ambassador Kelthera said in one heated debate. This is democracy. Real democracy, not the comfortable version we've been practicing. It's messy and loud and sometimes uncomfortable, but it's also the best protection against tyranny ever invented. You sound like a human, Peltorin said with disgust. Thank you, Kelthera said, meaning it. 6 months after the Battle of Concordia Prime, a memorial was erected in the main plaza of the capital city. It was a simple stone wall with names carved into it. Every being who had died defending Concordia Prime was listed there, organized not by species or rank, but alphabetically, as equals. At the top of the memorial, carved in letters large enough to read from across the plaza, was a single sentence: "They came asking us to bow. We showed them how to stand." The dedication ceremony was attended by millions. Representatives from every species came to honor the dead. The Vex-Korath sent representatives too, their first time attending a non-military gathering. They stood silently, processing what the memorial meant, trying to understand why organic beings honored death this way. President Okafor gave the dedication speech. She spoke about courage and sacrifice. She spoke about the 3,000 humans who had died on the Indomitable, and the millions of beings from other species who had fought just as bravely. She spoke about what the battle had meant and what it had taught them all. We learned that peace is not weakness, she said. We learned that civilization is not the absence of violence, but the presence of principles worth defending with violence if necessary. We learned that every species, no matter how peaceful they've become, has courage buried somewhere in their history. You just have to remember how to find it. She paused, looking out at the crowd. 50,000 years ago, humanity helped found the Conquered on principles of freedom and cooperation. Then we vanished and the galaxy forgot. Not just forgot about us, but forgot about the principles. You became so focused on keeping peace that you forgot what made peace worth having. You became so afraid of conflict that you were willing to surrender to avoid it. But something changed. When the Vex-Korath threatened everything you'd built, you remembered. You remembered that some things can't be negotiated away. That dignity and freedom and the right to choose your own path are worth fighting for. You remembered that sometimes the only moral choice is to stand up and say no. President Okafor's voice grew stronger. Earth's seat was always empty because the galaxy forgot these things. But now we've remembered together. And this memorial isn't just about honoring the dead. It's about remembering what they died for so we never have to ask others to make the same sacrifice again. The ceremony ended with a moment of silence that stretched across the entire planet. Billions of beings from thousands of species, all quiet together, all remembering. In the weeks that followed, life began returning to normal. Or rather, a new normal. The Conquered was different now. More active, more engaged, more willing to confront problems instead of debating them endlessly. The Vex-Korath kept their word. They returned occupied systems and began providing technology as reparations. Their observers seemed genuinely interested in learning about organic culture. General Chen started a training program, teaching Vex-Korath units about military honor and the laws of war. It was strange work trying to give machines ethics, but Chen approached it with the same determination he brought to everything. They're not evil, he explained to Kelthera during one of their regular meetings. They're just logical to the point where they don't understand that efficiency isn't the only value that matters. We're teaching them that there are costs that can't be measured in resources or time, costs measured in suffering and dignity, and the value of life itself. Do you think they'll learn? I think they're trying. That's all anyone can ask. The freethinker movement continued growing. Young beings from across the Concord traveled to Earth to study human government and philosophy. They attended universities in New York and Lagos and Mumbai and Shanghai, learning about concepts like constitutional rights and checks and balances and the rule of law. Some returned home and started reform movements. A few species held their first free elections in millennia. Others began writing constitutions that limited government power and protected individual freedom. It was slow work, and not everyone welcomed the changes. But the tide had shifted. 1 year after joining the Concord, President Okafor gave a speech to the Grand Assembly that would become famous across the galaxy. It was meant to be a simple report on Earth's first year as a member, but it became something more. When we came to the Concord, she said, many of you were afraid of what humanity would bring. You worried we were too aggressive, too independent, too unwilling to follow rules. You worried we would disturb the careful peace you'd built over thousands of years. She looked around the hall, meeting eyes with representatives from dozens of species. You were right to worry. We did disturb your peace. We asked uncomfortable questions. We challenged traditions. We pushed for changes that made many of you uneasy, and we're not going to stop. Some representatives shifted nervously. Others leaned forward with interest. But here's what you need to understand. The peace you had before wasn't real peace. It was just the absence of conflict, which isn't the same thing. Real peace is when you've solved the problems that cause conflict in the first place. When everyone has a voice. When everyone is treated fairly. When no one has to choose between freedom and safety. Because you've built a society that provides both. That's the peace humanity fights for. Not quiet submission, but active justice. Not comfortable stability, but dynamic equality. Not the peace of the graveyard, but the peace of the garden. Where things grow and change and sometimes compete, but in ways that make everyone stronger. President Okafor smiled. So yes, we're going to keep disturbing you. We're going to keep asking why things are done a certain way, and whether there's a better way. We're going to keep pushing for reforms and challenging the status quo, because that's what freedom looks like. It's messy and uncomfortable and sometimes frustrating, but it's also beautiful. It's the sound of billions of voices all speaking together, not in uniform chorus, but in complex harmony. It's the sight of individuals from 1,000 species, all different, all unique, all valuable. It's the knowledge that when you go to sleep at night, no one has power over you that you didn't grant them, and you can take it back anytime they abuse it. She paused, letting her words sink in. Earth's seat was always empty because the galaxy forgot this, but we're here now and we're not going to let you forget again. We're going to be that annoying friend who keeps reminding you of your principles even when it's inconvenient, especially when it's inconvenient. Because principles that only matter when they're convenient aren't really principles at all. The assembly was silent for a moment. Then someone started clapping. Then another. Soon half the assembly was applauding, while the other half sat in thoughtful silence. Ambassador Kelthera, watching from her own seat, felt pride swelling in her chest. She thought about the dusty, empty chair she'd discovered over a year ago. She thought about archivist Molteth and his years of research into a forgotten species. She thought about everything that had happened since. The galaxy had changed. Not completely, not perfectly, but noticeably. The Concord was becoming what it was supposed to be. What it had been at its founding. A union of free peoples choosing to work together. Not because they had to, but because together they were stronger. After the session ended, Kelthera found President Okafor on an observation deck, looking out at the stars. That was quite a speech, Kelthera said. I probably offended half the council. More like 2/3. But the right 2/3, Okafor smiled. You've changed, Ambassador. When we first met, you were so careful, so diplomatic. Now you sound like you're ready to start a revolution. Maybe I am. Humans do have that effect on people. Kelthera stood beside her, looking out at the same stars. My species, the Talvori, have been part of the Concord for 8,000 years. We've been peaceful for longer than that. We'd forgotten what it felt like to fight for something. To really fight. Not just defend passively, but attack the things that threaten what we love. And now? Now we remember. My people are writing a new constitution based partly on human models. We're having debates about individual rights and governmental limits. Some of the elders are horrified, but the young people are excited. They feel like they have a voice for the first time. That's good, Okafor said. That's what we hoped would happen. There's going to be conflict, Kelthera warned. Changes like this don't come easily. Some species will resist. Some might even leave the conquered. Let them. Freedom includes the freedom to make bad choices. If they want to stay stuck in the past, that's their right. We'll be here when they're ready to move forward. They stood in comfortable silence for a while. Then Kelthera asked the question that had been bothering her for months. President Okafor, are you ever afraid that you've changed us too much? That maybe humanity's influence will destroy what made the conquered stable for so long? Okafor thought about this for a long moment. I'm afraid every day. Afraid we're pushing too hard, moving too fast, asking for changes that people aren't ready for. But then I remember something my grandmother told me when I was young. She said, if you're not a little bit scared, you're not trying hard enough. Growth is uncomfortable. Change is frightening, but stagnation is death. The conquered was dying, she continued. Slowly, quietly, comfortably dying. You'd created a society so focused on avoiding conflict that you couldn't handle real threats when they appeared. Humanity didn't destroy that. We just helped you see it was already broken. So we're fixing it, Kelthara said. We're trying to fix it. Whether we succeed or not depends on everyone, not just humans. We're just the catalyst. The work is yours to do. Another year passed. The reforms continued, sometimes smoothly, often with difficulty. 3 species did leave the conquered, unwilling to accept the changes. Everyone mourned their departure, but respected their choice. The Vex-Korath surprised everyone by applying for associate membership in the conquered. Not full membership, they explained, but observer status. They wanted to learn more about organic government and contribute their technological expertise in exchange for continued education about organic values. The vote was contentious, but ultimately passed. The sight of Vex-Korath representatives standing in the assembly hall, learning to participate in democratic debate, was surreal but hopeful. On the 2nd anniversary of the Battle of Concordia Prime, a new tradition began. Every ship in the conquered fleet at exactly the same moment broadcast a simple message into space. We bow to no one. It became a rallying cry, a reminder, a promise. Species that had forgotten their own fierce histories remembered them. Cultures that had become passive rediscovered their courage. The galaxy was waking up from a long sleep, and at the center of it all in the Grand Assembly Hall sat a scarred metal chair with 3,000 names beside it. A reminder of what freedom cost. A promise that the cost was worth paying. A testament to the principle that some things are worth dying for, because they're what make life worth living. Earth's seat was no longer empty. Humanity was home. And the galaxy was better for it. Kelthara often visited the memorial in the plaza. She would stand there, reading names, remembering faces of people she'd met and those she hadn't. The Vex-Korath visitors confused her at first. Why did organics honor the dead this way? What purpose did it serve? She'd tried to explain. We honor them so we remember what they gave us. We honor them so their sacrifice means something. We honor them so we never forget that freedom isn't free. The Vex-Korath processed this for a long moment. Then one of them said something that surprised her. We are beginning to understand. They gave their operational existence to preserve the operational existence of others. This is inefficient from an individual perspective, but efficient from a collective perspective. This is what you call honor. It's more than efficiency, Kelthara said. It's love. They loved their people, their principles, their freedom more than they feared death. That's what makes it noble. We do not experience love, but we are learning to value it in others. We are learning that efficiency without purpose is meaningless. Purpose requires values. Values require choice. Choice requires freedom. Freedom requires courage. It is a complex calculation. Life is a complex calculation, Kelthara said with a smile. Welcome to understanding it. Years would pass. Generations would grow up knowing only this new, more dynamic conquered. They would take for granted rights their parents had fought to establish. They would question and challenge and push boundaries the way young people always did. And somewhere in the Grand Assembly Hall, a scarred metal chair would sit as a reminder. Not of war, though war was part of the story. Not of death, though death had purchased the peace. But of the simple, powerful principle that some truths are self-evident, that all sentient beings are created equal, that they are endowed with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The galaxy had forgotten these truths for 50,000 years. Earth had remembered. And in remembering, they'd taught the stars to stand tall once more. Earth's seat was always empty, not because humanity was gone, but because the galaxy had forgotten what humanity represented. Forgotten that freedom is a choice that must be made every day. Forgotten that peace without justice is just quiet oppression. Forgotten that sometimes the most moral thing you can do is stand up and say no. But the galaxy remembered now, and it would never forget again. Because some lessons are written in stone memorials and scarred metal chairs. And some lessons are written in the hearts of beings who look at the stars and refuse to bow. We bow to no one. Not now, not ever. Never again.